Good afternoon. I'm going to introduce myself real quick. My name is Brian Caine. I do not have a lot of fire safety experience, so I'm going to do the best I can with this presentation and try to cover all the topics that was required for the video. I do have very limited firefighting experience. I was in the United States Navy for 10 years. Worked on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, was trained in aircraft firefighting as well as general shipboard firefighting. We trained pretty frequently, especially on the flight deck in case we had a mishap, to control the fire, put it out, and rescue any pilots that were in there. So as I've not had a lot of experience in the civilian world, I definitely did while I was in the military. So the topics for this presentation are going to be to identify the basic concept of education, enforcement, and engineering, explain how code is enforced in my jurisdiction, describe how my jurisdiction applies code to new and existing occupancies, identify local organizations that determine fire resistance of building materials, identify the types of tests used to determine fire ratings of certain building components and materials in my area, describe how fire tests and fire ratings apply to inspection and code enforcement in my area, identify characteristics of unsafe structures in my area as they relate to code requirements, identify building construction type in my area that poses the biggest hazards for potential conflagration and fire spread, and then explain how plans review and structural control means as a means of fire protection would improve the safety of unsafe structures in my area. So as far as education, enforcement, and engineering, the goal of engineering is to design and build structures that are safe from fire using the best building practices that will resist fire and prevent great loss from fire. Enforcement is enforcing codes while buildings are being designed and built, ensure that the work is being done safe within required fire codes. Once the construction is completed, fire and life safety codes should be followed and then enforced. Education teaches people how to prevent the fires and what to do in the event of a fire. The reality is most people really don't know what to do in the event of a fire. Most people think they do, but then if you ask them, they really don't understand. It seems in most cases fire prevention receives the least amount of attention and definitely the least amount of budget as far as the fire department's operating budget. Adults and children and senior citizens, it all affects them in different ways. Oftentimes, small children do not know what to do when there is a fire or understand why we do things like have fire drills. Adults that are the ones that are supposed to take care of the children, but many times the children know more than the adult. And as far as senior citizens, they have diminished capabilities and they need retraining on how to evacuate properly. How they evacuated as a kid is definitely not how they're going to evacuate as an adult. Fire code enforcement can be broken down into different categories: unlawful acts, notice of violation, service of notice of violation or order, request for appeal, violation of penalties, restrictions on transfer, and application of fire codes on new or existing conditions. These are set by the fire chief to limit corrections. The provisions of the codes shall apply equally to the new and existing conditions. The next section, local organizations that determine fire resistance of building materials. During my research, I could only find two companies, Intertech and Gypsum Association. Those were the two companies I found that can perform fire resistance of building materials. Identifying the types of tests, I could find two The first was the Steiner tunnel test. The Steiner tunnel test is used to measure flame, excuse me, flame travel distance and optical density of smoke or insulated, jacketed, or both electrical wires and cables and optical fiber cables that are to be installed in plenums and other spaces used to transport environmental air without being enclosed raceways. The full-scale hydraulic tilting type fire resistant test is the second, and it's a dual-purpose apparatus that can be used to conduct tests on walls, doors, dampers, joints, penetration seals, slabs, ceilings, beams, ventilation ducts, in a vertical or horizontal orientation. As far as how fire tests and fire ratings apply to inspection and code enforcements, the tests and ratings are used to help ensure that buildings are constructed in a way that will minimize the spread of fire and protect occupants in the event of a fire. Fire ratings can also be used to determine the fire safety of a building and to identify potential fire hazard areas. There are 7 key characteristics when it comes to unsafe structures: building obsolescence, building dilapidated condition, building deterioration, building damage, structural inadequate exits, lack of sufficient fire-resistant construction, and faulty wiring, gas connections, or heating apparatus. The building construction types in my area that pose the biggest hazards for potential conflagration and fire spread. So in Lewiston, Maine, we were known as a mill town many years ago. We have a lot of old mills that were used to do manufacturing of textiles. So they were made out of wood on the inside and brick on the outside. Over the course of the textile mills, a lot of chemicals used in the textile manufacturing business have kind of seeped into this wood. So anytime there's been a fire in one of these old mill buildings, which a lot of them have been repurposed in the area, the building tends to burn hot and fast. So that's one of the major concerns in our area. A lot of training is done by the fire department in these buildings. And it's usually a pretty significant event when that happens. We also have numerous multifamily apartment buildings that are compacted in small areas. You know, these were built many years ago when the textile industry was booming in the city of Lewiston. That was to house all the people that were moving to the area to work in the textile mills. It was cheap, affordable housing. It was able to be built very quick. But because of that, the materials used to build it were cheap, not very fireproof, no sprinkler system, things like that, narrow passageways and hallways to get out of the buildings. So definitely areas of concern. And finally, reviewing structural control as a means for fire protection. How would that improve safety of unsafe structures? Reviewing plans prior to building, you could determine areas that would be unsafe. You could determine areas that may pose a fire hazard, and you can plan for that. You can add sprinkler systems, other fire suppression systems, or maybe redesign the particular area to make it a safer area. So I think it's definitely important to review plans, make sure everything is being done safely, everything's been considered, and by doing this, hopefully it reduces the amount of fires and how quickly they spread. Giving time for people to be able to get out of the building if there is a fire by using flame resistant materials, different items like that. Thank you.